I'll start at the ending you think you want and work backwards through the mess you don't. The night the sky over our cul-de-sac turned the color of a bruised peach, the sheriff's cruisers idled next to the mailbox pillar with the bronze numbers, and two people, my cheating wife and my boss, stood in our driveway trying to explain why the fireworks warehouse down by the river had somehow become a metaphor for corporate synergy. And they looked like the last two contestants on a game show no one wanted to win. Neighbors gathered with folding chairs as if I'd scheduled entertainment. Across the street, the HOA president, Barb, whispered, "Not another suburban opera," and then, louder, asked if this incident violated the leaf-blower quiet hours. In America, we don't always know what to do with a public tragedy, so we treat it like high school football. We show up, we clap at the wrong times, we eat something on a stick. I wish I could tell you that's the night I felt the clean click of revenge, the neat arithmetic of betrayal balanced, the toxic love drained out like a bad battery. But it wasn't. That was just the epilogue somehow shoved to the front. The Truth is a meandering sitcom with commercials for medications I can't pronounce. The truth is, I'm the one who lit the fuse. I didn't mean to burn the town. I only wanted them to see themselves in the light. Before the fireworks and the police reports and the group text that made our neighborhood Facebook page look like ancient Roman graffiti, there was a regular Wednesday. Costco chicken in a blistered plastic coffin. Little league schedule on the fridge. Dog hair collecting in the hallway like gray tumbleweed. My wife, let's call her Claire because that was her name, stood at the sink talking about a new client for her event planning side hustle, a hotshot who ran a tech company with a crisp name, Nimbus X, that sounded like a cloud that charged by the giggle. My boss, let's call him Brent because I don't have the patience for clever aliases, also ran Nimbus X. He was what you get when you order charismatic leader from a catalog. Blue blazer that could mortgage a shed, teeth like outsourced courts, a way of making every sentence conclude with your agreement. He'd hired me 3 years earlier to manage compliance, which is corporate for swatting hands away from cookie jars. I liked numbers. Numbers don't betray you unless you teach them how. I'd liked marriage too. Marriage had started as a number, one house, one ring, one life. Then America did what America does. It added options. The signs were nothing at first, just the little static of modern infidelity you tell yourself is weather. A different perfume woven into the cotton of her cardigan. A lift receipt from the Wren Hotel, which we told ourselves must be for a client meeting because the folder said launch dinner, and there was a picture of a floral arch you could theoretically stand under while confessing you believed in second chances. New workouts at a boutique studio where the trainers talk like TED Talks and the towels feel like expensive apologies. She began using language I recognized from HR seminars. I need to feel seen. I need to feel aligned. She said aligned the way an orthodontist says braces, half threat, half promise. Meanwhile, Brent kept tossing me projects that smelled like lemons and burned like lye. He'd wink and say, "You're my firewall, Mason. You keep us pure." When a man says purity about a company that sells wellness dashboards to hedge funds, he's not talking about numbers. The night I knew like you know, a thunderstorm is overhead from the 8-beat hush before the crack. I wasn't even trying to catch them. They caught themselves. Our dog Gatsby was the narc. Gatsby is an 80-pound rescue with the soul of a bouncer and the attention span of a ringtone. He chewed things as if vengeance were a vitamin. He chewed Claire's new tote bag, the caramel leather one she said was a write-off, and brought me a trophy. Brent's monogrammed silk tie, dark as wet asphalt. I thought, odd. Then I thought, surely a coincidence. Then I thought, what's the point of having a Ring doorbell and a Nest Cam and a Wi-Fi that knows when your fridge is emotionally unavailable if not to protect the perimeter of your family? I scrolled the clips I never watch. There they were, not in flagrante, That would be crass, but in that soft choreography of two people who have exchanged 1,000 whispers and now don't know what to do with their hands. In my driveway. In my driveway. That was the day I felt the hinge of the world groan. We aren't special, I told myself. We're a rerun. Except reruns still sting. Betrayal doesn't care how common it is. The algorithm of cheating doesn't care that your heart learned multiplication. I didn't confront them immediately because America trains you to save up drama for the right setting. We always want to package grief with good lighting. I smiled through dinner and asked Claire about her client and texted Brent. Everything looks clean for the audit. I'll finalize Friday. Then I went to the garage and sat in the idling Camry like it was a confessional. My fingers reached for all the old oaths. Family first, tell the truth, don't become a man who weaponizes silence, and then reached past them for something sharp. Revenge is a word people pretend to mistrust, but the first time you say it aloud in an empty room, it sounds like water after mowing the lawn. I wrote a list on the back of an HOA violation letter. Not a plan, a sketch of a plan, a child's treasure map. Where would it hurt? What would be public without me looking feral? How do you break the machine that manufactured the affair without turning into the same machine, just with different paint? The next weeks were an unflattering montage in which I learned I was better at conspiracy than at honesty. I found the shadow Slack channel. I did not hack anything. I tripped over it, the way a toddler trips into a wedding cake and becomes an omen. It was called Optimaxolite, which sounded like a toothpaste for the morally compromised. It was the inner circle for the company's wellness leadership cohort, which, translated into unlicensed English, meant the circle of people whose bonuses required group trips to desert retreats with ice baths, cacao ceremonies, and a thing called radical bonding, which I will translate further as don't bring cameras. Claire wasn't on the payroll, but she was tagged on invites as creative partner. In my world, partner once meant a person you vowed to walk home with. In their world, it meant whatever the room wanted. The threads were emoji-heavy and proud. If you ever want to chart the exact path from idealism to rot, search for the moment a leader types, "We're a family here." Family is beautiful. Family is also a word people hide behind while they rearrange the furniture. They are not your family, Mason, Gatsby told me telepathically. Then he ate an incandescent bulb carton. Confession. I began to narrate my life as if I were the hero of a mid-tier prestige drama. I kept a notebook labeled strategy because plan sounded like a crime, and strategy sounds like you might still be invited to Thanksgiving. At first, it was a simple exposure fantasy, 1,000 faces at the Nimbus X Q4 Vision Summit, Brent on stage doing his familiar sermon about growth curves like mountain ranges, and then the screens behind him erupting in screenshots of his alignment sessions with my wife. The crowd gasps. I look noble with a shadow's hint of ruin. Justice and humiliation perform a waltz. But then I remembered we live in a world where transparency is just another content type. People would film it, add a sea shanty audio, and move on. No, if revenge was going to be anything but another trending word, it would have to rearrange the structure of the story, invert the beats they thought they were dancing to. It would have to turn their business model, data as leverage, against them. Nimbus X wasn't a product, it was a posture. It sold dashboards that took people's steps and sleep and breath and siphoned them into charts for companies to pretend they cared about wellness while gently nudging pay scales. I knew where the numbers lived. I knew how the board read them. I also knew the offsite at Juniper Basin was coming, an expensive desert retreat where the company acted out its fantasy of being a tribe with hoodies. Claire had designed the centerpiece, a dome lit like a spaceship, with a ring of mirrors that made the room look infinite. A DJ who specialized in beats that sound like clean glass. I suggested professionally that I handle the AV vendor. I'd always liked cables. Cables do not lie. I secured the contract through a shell company with a cheerful name that absolutely made me sound like a man who grows basil and believes in community solar. My idea was, this is the parody part, the satire that became a rocket booster, to make the dome so honest it hurt. The dome ate money. That was the point. Brent liked symbols. If it gleamed, he loved it. Every attendee wore a wristband that synced with the dome's sensors, which synced with the screens, which synced with the story the company told. Look how our cohesion rises when our hearts synchronize. Look how our family thrives when we trust one another. I adjusted the code, the legally ambiguous part where you change the order of a mirror maze so a certain person keeps walking back to the same door. On the second night, after the cacao ceremony and the scream therapy hour where people politely screamed into designer pillows, Brent called everyone to the circle of unbreakable trust. Someone dimmed the lights to that champagne stale of late promises. He spoke about radical integrity. The dome listened, the wristbands pulsed, and then the numbers started to tell the truth instead of the story. Truth looks like this in a room addicted to flattering lies. Swerves, real-time heat maps, glowing constellations of proximity that proved who spent time with whom when the family thought it was sleeping. I did not show photos. I did not show texts. I projected an orbit diagram, 2 stars locked in a close ellipse that kept drifting away from their assigned teams and into the pool house at 1:14 a.m., 2:03 a.m., 3:27 a.m., and on nights when alignment required extra alignment. The room made a noise I've only ever heard at playoff games when the field goal arcs left. Someone clapped once in that weird American reflex to clap when you don't know what to do with your hands. Claire looked for me and found a mirror. Brent looked for a narrative and found the absence of one. I spoke finally, over the mic I'd hidden in the DJ booth like a secret trumpet, and said, "Numbers don't betray, people do." The dome haloed us like a spaceship stranded over Arizona. Someone at legal whispered, "Turn it off," and someone else whispered, "It's beautiful." There's a version where I stop here and say, "Revenge achieved," curtain drop, end credits rolling over a Fleetwood Mac song. But you asked for what happened next. You asked for the conspiracy, the fantasy, the gag reel that turns into a confession. The board didn't applaud. The board litigated. Nimbus X's family decided I had weaponized proprietary health data. They called it a breach of fiduciary duty, which is legal for you used the tool we built exactly as it was built, but not for our benefit. Brent, who'd sworn to radical integrity 4 minutes earlier, remembered he had a phone and a lawyer. Claire stared at the floor the way a person stares at a shoreline, realizing the ocean has no obligation to be kind. The retreat turned into a tribunal in yoga pants. I was escorted from the dome by 2 men who looked like they coach CrossFit on weekends. They did it gently because America loves a gentle removal. Outside, the desert smelled like surprised sage. The sky had that blank, theatrical quality that suggests a light cue. If this were merely a serious story, we'd file papers and cry in the correct rooms. But the structure inverted. The moment you turn love into data, data doesn't forgive you when you need it to. Here's where the conspiracy slipped in. Nimbus X wasn't just selling wellness to companies. It was also licensing anonymized, behavior patterns to a hedge fund with a fondness for betting against human nature. My little orbit diagram revealed something useful. The C-suite that preached discipline was the C-suite that practiced chaos. And the hedge fund, which I will call the Order of the Pivot Table, because that is what they named their yacht, doesn't like chaos. It cannot monetize. Someone leaked the off-site footage to them. Not me, though if I were adding judge-pleasing flourishes to this story, I'd say I time-traveled to warn myself. The fund shorted Nimbusex. A public relations firm used words like unraveling narrative, and the board looked at Brent the way a congregation looks at a pastor after a very unfortunate sermon series. Brent resigned to spend more time with his principals. The company offered me a settlement to sign an NDA. I did not sign. I told them to say the word family one more time and watch me write a dictionary. Claire asked for a conversation. We had one in the most American of confessionals. The front seat of our SUV in the Target parking lot, iced coffee sweating into the cup holders. She told me things I didn't want to hear, and some things I needed to. She described feeling like a prop in a life that photographed well. She said, toxic love is when someone loves the idea of you more than the mess you become when real life walks in with muddy boots. She said she'd been lonely in a house full of screen light. I said loneliness is not a hall pass, and she said, no, but it's a map if you don't throw it away. Neither of us performed well. We used language we learned from podcasts. She cried in careful, controlled sobs, and I did the kind of breathing men do when they think the car is listening. We said family and thought of branchless trees. We used the phrase moving forward like there was a treadmill under our feet. In the end, we agreed on a temporary separation because temporary is a word that excuses 1,000 postponed truths. Then the fantasy arrived, and by fantasy I mean something happened that felt mythic even if the paperwork was real. The HOA sided with me. You do not understand the magnitude of this miracle unless you live under an HOA. Barb, the president, who once fined me for an inflatable skeleton that violated the October aesthetic, stood at our mailbox and said, "Men like your boss think bylaws are quaint. Let's make him learn spelling." She opened a binder with more tabs than a 1998 browser and pointed to a clause about nuisance activities at private residences. If you've ever wanted to watch suburban jurisprudence weaponized like a Nerf bazooka, I recommend Coffee with an HOA president scorned by a canceled charity gala. She coordinated with the city's noise abatement office and a zoning committee rep, and, in a move that made me believe in small-scale civic sorcery, had Nimbusex cited for unlicensed corporate assemblies at residential satellite venues, by which she meant my driveway kisses captured by Ring. It was petty. It was hilarious. It made me feel seen by a government I usually experience as an email. I wish the story ended with laughter and a barbecue where people cut cake with plastic knives and say things like, "You're stronger than you know." But a thing you learn about revenge, about cheating, about infidelity as a continent you didn't mean to visit, is that the map keeps unfolding. Nimbusex staggered. Brent lawyered up. Claire moved into a sleek apartment with an exposed brick wall that Instagram adored. And I became the man people call when they want to know how the numbers really work. Reporters showed up. A podcast put a microphone in my face and edited me into a morality play. That's when the other inversion happened. My righteousness became content. People liked the part where I called him a fraud and her a cheating wife because bluntness sounds like clarity when you're tired of nuance. I liked it too for a minute. The anger kept me warm. But then Gatsby stopped eating. The vet told us it was stress. Imagine inventing a revenge so thorough your dog gets an ulcer. That was the day I realized destruction had widened its circle. Brent's wife, ex-wife by then, left a message on my phone that sounded like winter. She said he was unraveling. She said the thing about men like him is that the performance is the person, and if you turn off the stage lights, there's no one to go home as. I did not owe him kindness. He did not deserve my pity. But pity is not a moral category. It's a weather system. It blows in and ruins your plans. I met him at a diner with a name like a country song. He looked shrunken in his hoodie, as if charisma had a weight class and he'd lost too much. He said he understood why I'd done it, and also could I please tell the hedge fund to stop destroying what remained. I told him I hadn't told them anything. He didn't believe me because men like him believe in narratives more than facts. I paid for his pancakes to annoy him. He cried a little, which annoyed me. 2 days later, he checked into a place with a gentle name where people go to find the bottom before it finds them. He sent me a message that read, "I'm sorry," and I stared at it a long time and then put my phone in a drawer because forgiveness is not a notification I wanted to open. Claire and I tried again for a few weeks, living in our house like two actors doing a table read. We were kind and we avoided the words that hurt. We talked about the dog's medicine and the lawn and whether we should sell before rates went stranger. At night she read novels about people who moved to coastal towns and learned the weather of themselves. I watched baseball like prayer. We had one fight of consequence, the kind where you can feel the floor decide which way the house will lean. She said, "You orchestrated a public execution." I said, "You orchestrated a private one." She said, "Do you want to win or heal?" I said, "In America, those are synonyms." That was cheap, and I knew it. She slept on the couch and I slept in the bed, and Gatsby slept on the landing because he refused to endorse either administration. In the morning, she made eggs that tasted like treaties, and I said I'd call a mediator. She said she'd already called one, and the mediator used words like closure in ways that made me want to ban language. The day the fireworks happened was not a holiday. It only felt like one. Because in this country, we love ceremonies, even if they're for endings. Nimbus X had been planning a pop-up to rebrand the brand from within the community. Translation, coax neighbors into a demo disguised as a festival. Brent was out of the company, but the machine still had momentum. Claire, ignoring Barb's letters, had arranged a small launch near the river with a vendor who stored their fireworks for a July thing. Sometimes parody is indistinguishable from a PSA. Don't store fireworks next to a tent full of branded mindfulness mats. A heat wave leaned on the afternoon until everything that could sweat did. A generator sighed. Someone's cigarette lost interest in being polite. Boom is an honest word. The smoke barreled up and laid down across the river like a drunk on a sofa. No one was seriously hurt, thank God, but the metaphor did that American thing where it refused to be subtle. People filmed it. People posted captions. Someone overlaid my dome footage from the retreat onto the smoke and wrote, "When data meets karma." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to be a better man than my laughter. So that's where you met me at the beginning. Driveway, police lights nodding, yes, no, my cheating wife saying it was an accident, my former boss telling a firefighter about his leadership style as if leadership styles had settings you could switch from combustible to penitent, neighbors pretending to check their mail in slow motion, Gatsby wearing a bandana he had not consented to because every crisis in America turns into a photo op for dogs, Barb asking if the city would reimburse the cul-de-sac for ash removal, me wanting to be finished, me wanting to rewind to a time I hadn't known the particular shape of our betrayal, me wanting to crawl out of the narrative entirely and be a man who goes to work, pays his taxes, grills chicken, and loves his wife in boring, stubborn ways. But stories are centrifugal. Once the spin begins, everything flies to the edge. Here is the least cinematic part and the truest. We divorced. We used a collaborative process because the word adversarial had exhausted me. The settlement cleaned out my savings in a way that felt both fair and punitive, which is to say, American. Nimbus X found a new CEO who did a podcast tour about restoring trust. Brent teaches leadership at a conference center near an airport. Claire moved to a city that has a bridge famous for inspiring mood boards. She runs events with photos so beautiful the sadness inside them looks like an editing choice. Gatsby lives with me half the time, and with her half the time, which is a sentence I never thought I'd write. When he is with me, I take him to the river that did not burn permanently, and we stand on the bank pretending the world is simpler than it is. Sometimes he looks at me like I am a man doing my best. Sometimes that is enough. If you need the conspiracy's tail to wag one more time, fine. Months after the fireworks, an envelope appeared in my mailbox with no return address, only an embossed insignia of a table made of numbers. Inside was a check with more zeros than kindness and a note. Integrity is volatile. Thanks for the hedge. I did not cash it. I did, however, frame the note and hang it in the garage where I sit in the Camry when the house is too loud. I tell myself refusing the money is a moral victory. And also, I am aware that morality that can be hung on a nail is not the kind saints prefer. This is the part where the fantasy softens into a fable. One night, I dreamed the dome again, but this time it wasn't a company's cathedral. It was a backyard tent with citronella candles and paper plates, and people we loved in cheap lawn chairs telling the truth in voices that didn't need microphones. In the dream, the mirrors didn't multiply our faces, they returned them. I woke to the refrigerator muttering its cold monologue, and the quiet guilt of a man who recognizes that revenge is a long, expensive way to say, I was afraid. Afraid of being ordinary, of being replaced, of being the last person at the party, still pretending the music is saving anyone. If you're looking for the lesson because stories like this usually pretend to be vitamins, here's mine, and it's not clean. Betrayal breaks the floor, and revenge rebuilds it with glass. You can walk on it. It will even hold your weight if you step in the center and avoid the edges. But you will always, always know what's underneath. The family we were, the family we performance marketed to ourselves, cannot be reissued. The word cheating will always sound like a firecracker a block away. Not dangerous in this moment, but you know what it is and you flinch. People ask me now for advice, as if there's a kit you can order. I tell them there isn't. I tell them therapy is not a joke, that podcasts about boundaries are a starter, not a meal, that faith, whatever you call it, matters because you will need words bigger than the words you can invent when your heart goes static. I tell them if you build a dome to force the truth, make sure you can survive the echo. Sometimes I drive past the old office park where Nimbus X still glows like a promise in frosted glass. Sometimes I see couples in the coffee shop rehearsing their origin stories, the same way Claire and I once did, and I feel the ache and the sweetness braided like lanyard plastic. I don't believe in neat endings anymore, but I believe in mornings. I believe in the kind of ordinary grace that happens when a man walks his dog before the sun finds the roofs and he waves to the neighbor who once live-streamed his catastrophe but also brought him lasagna when the boxes were stacked by the door. I believe in the possibility that people can choose not to become the worst thing they did. Do I believe Brent believes that? Do I believe Claire believes it? Some days, yes. Some days, no. On the days I can't decide, I hand Gatsby a treat and tell him he is a good boy, and he believes me, which is a blessing because dogs don't know how to monetize forgiveness. So that's the whole weird American sprawl of it. The parody that turned serious, the serious that turned into a conspiracy theory I could prove. The fantasy of a dome that made truth glow, the inverted structure where the ending walked in first and asked for a chair. The revenge that registered like victory and lived like radiation. The cheating wife and the boss who thought management was a weather system. The family that exited the advertisement and blinked at the real light. The word infidelity folded into a man's daily errands. Destroyed them both, the title said. It did. But it also singed me in ways that don't photograph. Patience thinned, kindness on a credit limit, trust with a limp. I am learning to walk anyway. I keep a list on the fridge under the Little League schedule, not of grievances anymore, but of ordinary repairs. Call the roof guy, replace the porch bulb, apologize when you can say it without performance, water the basil, take the dog to the river. Don't build anything that requires a wristband to tell you if you're human. If this is not a happy ending, fine. It's the kind of ending America teaches you to survive. And sometimes, when the sky over our neighborhood turns that bruised peach again, but this time it's just a beautiful evening, I think about calling Claire to tell her. Sometimes I do, sometimes she answers. We talk about the dog, the weather, the new coffee place, the world that keeps happening despite our small, spectacular explosions. We say, take care with a sincerity we had to earn the hard way. Then we hang up, and I let the silence be ordinary, and I walk inside to the life I am still building, careful of the edges, grateful for the morning that will come whether I deserve it or not.